The message arrived at exactly noon on a Tuesday, and it changed everything humanity thought it knew about the universe. Admiral Carroll was sitting in her office at Earth Command when the transmission came through. She was 58 years old with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many battles. The screen in front of her flickered, and then a face appeared. It was not human. The creature had green scales, yellow eyes with vertical pupils, and a mouth full of sharp teeth. It wore golden armor decorated with symbols that meant nothing to her. "I am High Commander of the Dominion," the creature said. Its voice was deep and cold. "Your species has been judged. You have 72 hours to surrender all your colonies and submit to permanent service under our empire. Resistance will result in complete extinction. This is not a negotiation. This is a fact." The transmission ended. Carol sat very still for a long moment. Then she pressed a button on her desk and said, "Get me everyone, now." Within 1 hour, every leader of humanity was connected to the same emergency call. Presidents, generals, scientists, and admirals all stared at each other through screens. Carol played the message again. When it finished, there was silence. "How many ships do they have?" asked General from the European Defense Council. "Our intelligence says approximately 3,000 warships," answered Lieutenant Park. He was 29 years old and worked as a tactical analyst on the carrier USS Resolute. He had been brought into the call because he had spent 3 years studying them. "They have conquered over 200 star systems and defeated at least 40 different species. No one has ever successfully resisted them." "And how many ships do we have?" asked President Diana. 400 combat-ready vessels," Carol said. "Another 200 that could be ready in a week, but we do not have a week. Their fleet is already moving toward us." The silence returned. Everyone in the call understood what those numbers meant. This was not a war they could win through normal means. This was extinction knocking on their door. Dr. Shaw spoke next. She was 45 years old and had dedicated her life to studying alien cultures. "I have been researching them for 15 years. There is something important you all need to understand about them." "Go ahead," Carol said. "They have never lost because they have never faced real resistance. Every species they attacked either surrendered immediately or fought in conventional ways. Fleet against fleet, ship against ship. They are excellent at that kind of war, but they have a weakness." Paused. "They do not understand deception." "What do you mean?" asked General. "In culture, lying is the greatest dishonor. They do not practice it. They do not expect it. Their military tactics are brilliant but completely straightforward. They announce their attacks. They fight in formations that have not changed in centuries. They consider tricks and traps to be beneath them." Leaned forward. "They have never fought a species that lies as naturally as humans do." Park was nodding. "She is right. I have analyzed every battle they have ever fought. They always attack in the same patterns. They always respond to threats in predictable ways. It is like they are following a script that has worked so well they never thought to change it." Carol stood up. Something was forming in her mind, a plan so insane that it might actually work. "What you are telling me is that no one has ever cheated against them." "Correct," said. "No one has ever hidden their ships, faked their numbers, planted traps, or made them see things that were not real. Never. They would consider such tactics beneath contempt." Carol smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a woman who had just realized that her enemy had a blind spot the size of a planet. "Ladies, and I think I know how we survive this." She began to explain. The plan was called Operation Mirage, and it required every human being to work together in ways they never had before. Factories would switch to war production within hours. Civilian ships would be converted into weapons. Pirates and criminals would be offered full pardons in exchange for their skills. Every trick humanity had ever learned in its long history of fighting itself would now be turned against an enemy from the stars. "This is madness," General said when she finished. You want us to fight the largest military force in the galaxy with tricks and lies." "Yes," Carol said simply, "because that is what humans do. We adapt, we cheat. We find the one weakness our enemy has and we exploit it until they break. They think they are going to fight a primitive species that will crumble under pressure. They are wrong. They are about to fight the most deceptive, stubborn, and vicious species in this galaxy, and they have no idea what that means." President was quiet for a moment, then she nodded. "What do you need?" "Everything. Every ship, every soldier, every scientist, every criminal who knows how to fight dirty. I need humanity to stop being separate nations and start being one species. I need us to become exactly what they are afraid we might be." "They are not afraid of us," pointed out. "Their message made that clear." "Not yet," Carol agreed. "But they will be. Within hours, they will regret ever learning that humans exist." The call ended. Across Earth and every human colony, the word spread. This was not a time for fear. This was not a time for surrender. This was the moment humanity had secretly been preparing for since they first looked up at the stars and wondered if something was looking back. Carol returned to her desk and began making calls. She contacted smugglers she had spent her career hunting. She reached out to hackers who had caused her endless problems. She spoke to soldiers who had retired in disgrace and scientists whose ideas had been rejected as too dangerous. All of them answered the same way: "Tell me what you need." By the time 6 hours had passed, humanity was transforming, not into a frightened prey animal waiting for the predator, into something else entirely, something the galaxy had never seen before. They had declared war on humanity. They expected submission or destruction. They were about to learn that humans had a third option, and it was going to hurt. 6 hours after the declaration, Earth looked exactly the same from orbit. The city still glowed at night. The ocean still sparkled blue. Nothing seemed different, but beneath that peaceful surface, humanity was becoming something dangerous. Admiral Carroll stood in the war room deep beneath the mountains of Colorado. Screens covered every wall, showing information from across human space. She watched as numbers changed by the minute: ships being armed, soldiers being mobilized, factories switching their production lines from consumer goods to weapons of war. "The response has been faster than we expected," said Park. He stood beside her, his tablet showing a constant stream of updates. "Pirate fleets from the outer colonies have already pledged their ships. The mining corporations are converting their heavy haulers into ram ships. Even the religious communities on Mars are sending volunteers." Carol nodded. She had hoped for cooperation, but this was something more. This was a species that had finally found a common enemy. All the old hatreds between nations, between planets, between factions meant nothing now. There was only humanity and there was everything else. "What about the special assets?" she asked. Pulled up a new screen. "Dr. Shaw has finished her analysis of communication frequencies. We can broadcast directly into their ships now. The Psychological Warfare Division has prepared the first wave of transmissions." "Show me." The screen displayed a series of images and videos. They were scenes from human history, carefully selected to deliver a single message. The first showed ancient warriors charging into battle against impossible odds. The next showed soldiers in a frozen wasteland, refusing to surrender even as they starved. Another showed a single man standing in front of a line of tanks, and another showed a city in ruins with people already beginning to rebuild. "The message is simple," explained. "We are showing them what we do to ourselves, the wars we have fought, the destruction we have caused, the suffering we have endured and survived. If this is what we do to each other, imagine what we will do to an enemy we truly hate." Carol smiled grimly. "Perfect. Make sure every ship receives this on a loop once the battle begins." In another part of the command center, Dr. Shaw was leading a team of psychologists. They had one job: understand the mind well enough to break it. Their culture is based entirely on honor and hierarchy. explained to her team. The greatest shame a can experience is to be defeated by someone they consider inferior. They classify species into ranks based on military power and technological advancement. Humans are currently ranked at the bottom of their scale. They see us as barely more than animals. How do we use that? Asked one of her assistants. We make sure they know exactly who is beating them. Every trap we set, every trick we play, we make it clear that it was humans who did it. Primitive, weak, inferior humans. By the time we are finished, every soldier will know that they were outsmarted by the species they laughed at. That shame will spread through their ranks like a disease. Meanwhile, in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, Captain Maria Santos was preparing her part of the operation. She was 34 years old with dark hair and a reputation for doing the impossible. Her ship, the Silent Blade, was one of 12 vessels painted completely black and running without any active signals. Remember, she told her crew over the internal communicator, we do not exist. As far as the sensors know, we are just more rocks floating in space. We get close, we attach the disruptors to their hulls, and we disappear. No shooting, no heroics, we are ghosts. Her second in command, a man named Danny Price, checked his equipment one more time. What if they detect us? Then we improvise. That is what humans do best. Maria paused. They have never fought an enemy that hides. They have never faced an opponent that refuses to meet them in open battle. We are going to teach them that the most dangerous enemy is the one you cannot see. Back on Earth, the transformation continued. In factories that had been building household appliances yesterday, workers now assembled missile components. Universities emptied as students volunteered for military service. Hospitals prepared for casualties that everyone hoped would never come but knew probably would. Admiral received a call from President. The public is asking what they should do, the President said. They want to help, but they do not know how. Tell them to prepare for anything, Carol answered. If our fleet fails, they will come to Earth itself. Every person who can hold a weapon should be ready to use it. Every building can become a fortress. Every city can become a trap. We will not make this easy for them, no matter what happens in space. The President was quiet for a moment. Do you really think we can win this? Carol considered the question carefully. I think we can make them regret starting it. I think we can hurt them badly enough that they never try again. Whether that counts as winning depends on how you define victory. And if we lose? Then we lose fighting. We lose making them pay for every inch of space they take. We lose leaving wounds that will never heal. Carol's voice hardened. They have conquered 40 species. None of those species fought like we are about to fight. When historians write about this war 1,000 years from now, they will say that humanity went down swinging so hard that the galaxy itself trembled. The hours passed. The fleet moved closer. On every human world, people watched the news and waited. Some prayed, some wept, but most simply worked, preparing for what was coming with a grim determination that surprised even themselves. Humanity had spent its entire history fighting itself. Now all that practice, all that pain, all that experience in the art of destruction would finally serve a purpose. They wanted a war. They were about to get one unlike anything they had ever imagined. Admiral looked at the tactical display showing the approaching enemy fleet. 3,000 ships against 400. The numbers were hopeless, but numbers were not everything. Signal all commands, she said. Operation Mirage is active. Show them what humans can do. 18 hours after the declaration of war, the Vanguard fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system. 500 warships emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their weapons charged and their crews ready for battle. High Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, and waited for the primitive humans to appear. They did not come. Scan the system, ordered. His voice was calm. He had done this many times before. 40 species had fallen to his fleets and none had offered serious resistance. No enemy vessels detected, his sensor officer reported. The space around us is empty except for natural debris, asteroids and inactive satellites only. Felt a flicker of irritation. He had expected at least a token defense force. Some species tried to delay the inevitable by throwing their ships at his fleet in desperate attacks. Others sent diplomats to beg for mercy. The humans were doing neither. Perhaps they are hiding on their planet, suggested his second-in-command, fleet captain. Cowering in their cities, hoping we will show mercy. There will be no mercy, said. Signal the fleet to advance. If the humans will not come to us, we will go to them. The 500 ships began moving deeper into the system. Their formation was perfect, as it always was. They had developed their battle tactics over thousands of years, and those tactics had never failed. Each ship knew exactly where to be and what to do in any situation. What they did not know was that they were already surrounded. Captain Maria Santos watched the fleet pass within 100 kilometers of her position. Her ship, the Silent Blade, drifted among the asteroids with its engines cold and its systems running on minimal power. To sensors, it was just another rock. Team 1, report, she whispered into her communicator. In position, devices attached to 12 targets. Team 2, 15 targets marked, ready on your signal. Maria counted silently as the ships continued forward. They were so confident, so perfectly arranged, so completely unaware that they had already lost. On the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, a communication officer turned to. Commander, we are receiving a transmission. It appears to be from a human vessel. Show me. The main screen flickered, and a human face appeared. It was a woman with dark hair and a smile that seemed entirely inappropriate for someone facing certain death. She wore a simple uniform with no visible rank or insignia. Hello there, she said pleasantly. My name is Maria Santos. You must be I have heard so much about you. Conquerors of 40 species, masters of 200 star systems, very impressive. Leaned forward. You dare address me directly. Know your place, primitive. Your species will be slaves within a week. Maria's smile did not waver. You know, every species you have conquered probably thought the same thing at first. They saw your big ships and your scary weapons, and they decided resistance was impossible. They gave up before they even started. Because they understood reality, as you will soon understand. Maybe, Maria tilted her head slightly, but here is the thing about humans. We do not understand reality very well. We are stubborn like that. So instead of surrendering, we decided to try something different. Her smile widened. You should have done your research. The transmission ended. Opened his mouth to order his fleet to find and destroy that ship, but before he could speak, chaos erupted. Across the formation, 200 ships suddenly lost power. Their engines died. Their weapons went offline. Their lights flickered and failed. The devices that Maria's teams had attached to their hulls had activated, overloading their power systems with precisely targeted electromagnetic pulses. What is happening? Shouted. Alarms were screaming throughout the flagship. Before anyone could answer, the asteroids began to move. What sensors had classified as ordinary space rocks suddenly ignited engines and accelerated toward the crippled ships. They were not asteroids at all. They were human vessels disguised as debris, packed with explosives and programmed to strike. Dozens of them slammed into warships in brilliant explosions. Return fire, commanded. Destroy them all. The weapons lashed out, filling space with energy beams and missiles. They hit targets after target, obliterating the attacking rocks. But for every one they destroyed, 2 more seemed to appear, and the targets kept multiplying. Commander, our sensors are malfunctioning, the sensor officer reported. His voice was shaking. We are detecting enemy fleets everywhere, thousands of ships surrounding us. Looked at the tactical display and saw what his officer meant. Human warships appeared to be emerging from every direction, vastly outnumbering his force. It was impossible. The humans did not have that many ships. This had to be some kind of trick. It was. The human vessels were broadcasting false sensor signatures, making each ship appear as 10 or 20 on screens. Decoy drones added to the confusion, creating ghost fleets that existed only as electronic phantoms. But they did not know that. They saw themselves surrounded by an enemy armada and reacted exactly as their training demanded. They began firing at everything, wasting ammunition on targets that did not exist, while the real human ships slipped closer under cover of the chaos. 3 hours later, it was over. Of the 500 ships that had entered the Sol system, only 180 remained operational. The rest were destroyed, disabled, or drifting without power. Human losses were minimal because the humans had barely engaged in direct combat at all. High Commander stood in the wreckage of his bridge and tried to understand what had happened. His perfect fleet had been torn apart by an enemy that refused to fight properly. They had used tricks and deceptions and cowardly tactics that no honorable species would ever employ. "Signal the main fleet," he said quietly. "Warn them. These humans are not what we expected. They do not fight with honor. They fight like animals, like vermin." He paused, and for the first time in his long career, doubt entered his voice. "We may need more ships." The surviving vessels retreated, transmitting their warnings to the approaching main fleet. The message was clear. Something was very wrong with these humans. They did not behave like conquered species should behave. Back among the asteroids, Maria Santos watched the enemy withdraw. She allowed herself a moment of satisfaction before returning to business. "Phase 1 complete," she reported to Admiral. "They are scared and confused. Ready for Phase 2 on your command." Carol smiled in the war room on Earth. This was just the beginning. "Excellent work, Captain. Now let us really make them nervous." 24 hours after the war began, the galaxy was watching. In a space station orbiting a distant star, Ambassador of the Collective reviewed the incoming reports with growing disbelief. They were a peaceful species who had survived for thousands of years by staying neutral and gathering information. They knew everything about everyone, and what they knew about humans had always suggested that this young species would be easily conquered. The reports now showed something very different. "This cannot be accurate," said to her assistant. "The lost over 300 ships in the first engagement." "The reports are confirmed, Ambassador. The humans used unconventional tactics, ambushes, electronic warfare, psychological manipulation, nothing they had prepared for." Studied the data carefully. She had observed the conquer dozens of species, and the pattern was always the same. The target species would panic, fight briefly, then surrender or be destroyed. The whole process usually took days at most. The humans were not following the pattern. "What do our analysts say?" she asked. "They say the humans fight like no species in recorded history. They do not seek honorable combat. They do not try to match the enemy force for force. They identify weaknesses and exploit them ruthlessly. Our analysts are calling it disturbing." Nodded slowly. She had read human history files years ago and had found them unsettling. A species that had spent most of its existence fighting itself, developing ever more creative ways to kill and destroy. She had dismissed them as primitives who would eventually wipe themselves out. Now she wondered if the galaxy had fundamentally misunderstood what humans actually were. Meanwhile, at the edge of the Sol system, the main fleet had arrived. 2,500 warships, 10 times the size of the advance force. High Commander had transferred his flag to a new vessel after the destruction of the Eternal Conquest. He now commanded from the bridge of the Absolute Dominion, surrounded by his most experienced officers. "The humans are broadcasting again," his communication officer reported. Hesitated. The last broadcast had preceded disaster, but refusing to receive a message would be seen as cowardice. "Show me." The screen activated, and this time it was not a single human face. It was a collection of images and video recordings, one after another, watched in silence as the display showed human history. He saw ancient warriors fighting with primitive weapons, refusing to retreat even when surrounded. He saw soldiers in a frozen wasteland eating their dead companions rather than surrendering to the enemy. He saw cities burned to ash and rebuilt, then burned again, then rebuilt again. He saw weapons of unimaginable destruction used against human cities by other humans. He saw a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of causing suffering. And at the end, text appeared in the language. "This is what we do to each other. Imagine what we will do to you." The bridge was silent. Even, who had served with for 20 years, seemed shaken. "They are trying to frighten us," said firmly. "It will not work. Signal the fleet to advance. We will crush them with overwhelming force." But his voice lacked its usual confidence. And as the fleet moved forward, individual commanders began accessing the historical archives themselves. They read about human wars, human atrocities, human survival against impossible odds. Some of them stopped reading because they could not continue. On Earth, Admiral Carroll received word that the main fleet was advancing. She stood in the war room with Park and Dr. Shaw, reviewing the next phase of the operation. "The psychological campaign is working," reported. "Our intercepts show significant communication between ships. They are discussing human history. Many of them are questioning whether this war is worth the cost." "That is not enough to make them retreat," said. "They have never retreated from any conflict. Their culture does not allow it." "Then we need to give them a reason to create a new exception," Carol said. She turned to the main screen. "It is time for my part." She activated a direct broadcast to the flagship. Within seconds, her face appeared on High Commander's screen. "Commander," she said calmly, "I am Admiral Carroll of the Earth Defense Fleet. I wanted to speak with you directly before this goes any further." Glared at her. "You wish to surrender," finally showing wisdom. "No, I wanted to answer a question you asked earlier. When your ships were burning around you, you asked what kind of species we are." Carol paused. "Let me tell you." She leaned forward slightly. "We are the species that tamed wolves and turned them into companions. We split the atom and used it to destroy 2 of our own cities just to end a single war. We walked on our moon within a century of learning to fly. We have survived ice ages, plagues, famines, and wars that killed hundreds of millions of our own kind. Every single catastrophe that should have ended us instead made us stronger." "Said nothing." "You have conquered 40 species," Carol continued. "All of them surrendered or fought in ways you understood. Organized battles, predictable tactics, honorable combat. We are not going to do that. We are going to fight dirty. We are going to cheat. We are going to use every trick and trap and deception that our violent history has taught us. And we are never, ever going to stop." "You cannot defeat us," said, but his voice was uncertain now. "Maybe not, but we can make sure that victory costs you more than you can afford to pay. We can wound your fleet so badly that your enemies back home will smell weakness. We can turn this war into a nightmare that haunts your species for generations." Carol smiled coldly. "Or you can leave, right now, and pretend this never happened." The transmission ended, sat in silence for a long moment. Around him, his officers waited for orders. None of them spoke. For the first time in his life, High Commander felt something he had never experienced in battle. He felt afraid. 36 hours after declaring war on humanity, High Commander made the decision that would change galactic history. He ordered the advance. 2,500 warships moved toward Earth in perfect formation. Behind them, the wreckage of their advance fleet served as a warning of what the humans could do, but had decided that warnings were not the same as defeat. He still had overwhelming numbers. He still had superior technology. He would crush these deceptive primitives and restore honor to the Dominion. The human fleet came out to meet them. It was not much of a fleet by standards. 300 ships of various sizes, clearly outmatched, and they formed a line between the Armada and Earth, like a thin wall trying to hold back an ocean. "They are fools," said. "Do they really think they can stop us with that?" "It does not matter what they think," replied. "Open fire." The weapons activated, sending waves of energy toward the human line. The humans fired back. Space between the two fleets became a storm of destruction. The first human ship exploded, then another, then a third. They pressed forward, confident that this battle would follow the same pattern as all the others. It did not. The human ships did not retreat. As their companions died around them, they pushed forward instead of back. Damaged vessels that should have withdrawn continued fighting. Ships that were clearly dying used their last moments to ram cruisers, sacrificing themselves to take enemies with them. Watched in disbelief as a human destroyer, its hull torn open and venting atmosphere, accelerated directly into one of his battleships. The pilot must have known he was dead. There was no escape possible, but instead of accepting death quietly, he turned himself into a weapon. "What are they doing?" whispered. All across the battle, similar scenes played out. Human pilots flew into certain death with no hesitation. They did not surrender. They did not flee. They fought until their ships were destroyed and then used the destruction itself as a final attack. While the battle raged, something else was happening that did not see. A small shuttle, disguised as debris, slipped through the chaos and attached itself to the hull of the Absolute Dominion. Inside the shuttle, Lieutenant Park led a team of 12 soldiers. They cut through the hull and entered the ship, moving quickly through corridors designed for beings much larger than humans. They were not here to kill. They were here to deliver a message. The team fought their way to the bridge access corridor, leaving a trail of confused guards behind them. When they finally reached the main doors, activated his communicator. "Admiral, we are in position." On Earth, Carol received the signal, "Do it." The doors to the bridge exploded inward. Officers reached for weapons, and his team were not attacking. They simply stood there in the heart of the enemy flagship, surrounded by beings who could kill them instantly. Held up a small device. "High Commander, I have a message for you." The device projected a hologram. It showed Earth, peaceful and blue, rotating slowly in space. Then it showed something else. Every human city, every colony, every station and ship, all connected by glowing lines. A network of information and resources that spanned the entire species. "We will never surrender," said. "If you destroy our fleet, we will fight with our stations. If you destroy our stations, we will fight from our colonies. If you destroy our colonies, we will fight from Earth itself. And if you destroy Earth, the survivors will scatter across the galaxy and spend the rest of their lives hunting your kind." He took a step closer to, "You cannot win. Not really. You can kill us, but you cannot defeat us. There is a difference, and every species in the galaxy is watching right now to see what happens next." Outside, the battle continued. The human fleet was being destroyed ship by ship, but they kept fighting, every single one of them, and with every ship that fell, felt something growing in his chest. It was not victory, it was horror. These creatures were insane. They did not fight to win. They fought to make their enemies suffer. They treated death as a weapon, not a consequence. How could you defeat an enemy that embraced destruction with such joy? And Park was right. The galaxy was watching. Other species would see how the mighty struggled against these primitives. They would see the price that had to be paid, and they would wonder if the Dominion was truly as powerful as it claimed. Looked at the human standing on his bridge, small, fragile, completely at his mercy. He could kill this creature with a single blow, but what would that prove? Another human would simply take his place, and another, forever. "Get him off my ship," said quietly. His officers stared at him. Commander. Signal the fleet, closed his eyes. We are withdrawing. The human fleet stopped firing as they began to pull back. On every screen across the galaxy, observers watched in disbelief as the greatest military force known to civilization retreated from a species they had called primitive. 47 hours after declaring war, the Dominion officially announced a ceasefire. Their statement claimed that humanity was not worth the resources required to conquer them. No one believed it. 1 year later, Ambassador of the Collective stood before a classroom of young students. Behind her, a hologram showed a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star. This world, she said, is called Earth. The species that lives there calls themselves humans. They are not the strongest species in the galaxy. They are not the most advanced. They do not have the largest fleet or the most powerful weapons. She paused, letting the children study the image. But they taught the something important. They taught all of us something important. She turned to face her students. Size and technology are not what make a species dangerous. What makes a species dangerous is will. The willingness to fight when fighting is hopeless. The willingness to endure pain without breaking. The willingness to keep standing up no matter how many times you are knocked down. She pointed at the hologram of Earth. Remember this world. Remember these creatures, because they showed the galaxy that the only species you truly cannot defeat is the one that refuses to accept defeat. On Earth, Admiral Carroll had retired. Park now served as one of the youngest admirals in human history. Dr. Shaw had written a book that became required reading for every alien diplomat. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, other species looked at humanity differently now. Not with contempt, not with pity. With respect. And perhaps just a little bit with fear. They had declared war on humanity, expecting easy victory. They had regretted it within hours, and the galaxy would never forget the lesson that humanity had taught them all. Some species are not meant to be conquered. Some species are meant to be left alone. Humanity was both.